Good morning. Welcome to the first webinar in a new series focusing on managing drought in the Southern Plains. I'm Mark Schaefer of the Southern Climate Impacts Planning Program and will be the moderator for today's webinar. We will be joined by David Brown, NOAA Regional Climate Services Director for the Southern Region, Mark Svoboda from the National Drought Mitigation Center, John Nielsen-Gammon, Texas State Climatologist, David DuBois, New Mexico State Climatologist, and Gary McManus, Associate State Climatologist for Oklahoma. Margaret Boone, SCIP Program Manager, is managing the webinar. I will begin briefly with some logistics before getting to today's topic, which is an overview and evolution of the drought. This is the first in a series which will occur bi-weekly on the second and fourth Thursdays of each month at the same time. Each webinar will begin with an overview and outlook led by one of the U.S. Drought Monitor authors. This will be followed by comments from one of the state climatologists rotating between Texas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma, and perhaps including neighboring states as needed. In addition to John, David, and Gary, several other state climatologists are on the call today. Most of the allotted 20 minutes will be dedicated to a focused discussion topic. Margaret is putting up a poll on your screen for you to vote on the topic that you would like presented next. There will be two polls. The set you see now focused on different sectors or types of impacts, and the one to follow on different types of resources. We plan to alternate between a sector-focused topic and a resource-focused topic on each of the subsequent webinars. I'll give you a chance to enter the poll, but in the meantime, let you know our partners have developed a tentative list of topics. As you may notice, not all the topics are listed in your poll due to a limit of 5 choices per question. If you strongly prefer one of the options that is not listed in the poll, or you would like to suggest additional topics, you may do so through typing in the dialog box on your screen or responding to the survey question when you exit today's webinar. So we'll now put up the second poll and give you a chance to vote on these other topics. You may ask questions or make comments at any time through typing in your dialog box, or you can raise your hand on the menu and we will call on you once the presentations are done. We ask that you keep your phone on mute if you are not speaking in order to minimize background noise. Each webinar will be recorded and a brief PDF summary will be produced and posted on the South Central Communications portion, or South Central Communities portion of the U.S. Drought Portal, drought.gov. We have put up a list of resources, including these links again at the end of the presentation. Before moving into today's program, I would like to acknowledge the partners who brought this webinar series together. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, National Integrated Drought Information System, or NIDIS, you may hear those acronyms referred to by several presenters, the National Drought Mitigation Center, the State Climatologists, and the NOAA Regional Integrated Sciences and Assessments Program, represented here through 2 of the regional teams, the Southern Climate Impacts Planning Program and Climate Assessment for the Southwest. I will now turn it over to Dave Brown, NOAA South Central Region Climate Services Director, who will give some background on what we hope to accomplish with this new webinar series.
Thanks very much, Mark. Good morning, everyone. And on behalf of NOAA, let me just say welcome and thank you for being a part of this effort today. It's great to see such a diversity of organizations and individuals represented on the call. As Mark alluded to, this is part of a broad partnered effort, and really it's one of a series of activities that we are coordinating right now in the Southern Plains in response to the drought. There is a media briefing series, a parallel briefing series just for the press that's going to kick off in early October that the National Weather Service and NOAA are taking a leading role in facilitating. And we are planning on a second Drought Outlook and Assessment Forum sometime this fall within the 3-state area, very similar to the one we held in Austin back in July, and I see there are some folks on this call who are in attendance at that meeting as well. And we'll certainly keep all of you appraised of those and other activities as they continue to develop. For today, we are focused on kicking off this webinar series, as Mark very nicely introduced, and in front of you, you can see a few bullets that highlight some of the major goals that we have for this series, both within NOAA and with our interagency partners. Obviously, a chief one is to continue building communication capacity in the region among federal, state, and local agencies who are providing climate information, but also with organizations who are operating in this Southern Plains region and who are responding to the drought conditions. And it's great to see some actually quite a few new organizations and agencies on the call today. We're very excited about building some new partnerships with all of you. I think one of the things you'll see today and going forward is a very explicit focus on making sure that information on resources and assistance programs in response to the drought is being made available to all of you, and I hope that that will be a useful part of these webinars. We are hoping on the NOAA side and elsewhere that the discussion during these calls and the subsequent outcomes will help us improve the way we do business. For example, improving the local depiction of drought in Texas, in Oklahoma, and in New Mexico in the U.S. Drought Monitor, which you'll see in just a minute. And also more generally, improving our understanding of the way droughts evolve and decay in this part of the country, both climatologically and with respect to the impacts on the landscape. But I think most of all, and it's highlighted in that third bullet there, this webinar series really provides an opportunity for those folks who are on the call who are tasked with managing drought in your organizations to really have an opportunity to share your perspectives on the challenges and needs that you face with respect to this drought and in future droughts. And those conversations are going to be invaluable for us at NOAA and with our partners as we continue to improve the way we develop and deliver regional climate services for this drought and for other environmental issues here in the Southern Plains. So we're very excited about this, and once again, welcome. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mark Svoboda of the National Drought Mitigation Center.
If I could briefly remind people, if you are not presenting, please put your phone on mute for now. Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. My job here at the kickoff in each of these webinars, what we plan to do is sort of give a brief overview of the big picture, and then that will help set the stage for the local state climatologists and others to jump in later on. So if we go to the first slide here, we'll take a look at the drought monitor that was just released this morning. It's obvious you can see the epicenter of this drought as we head into basically year 2 is really focused over the Southern Plains and the Four Corners region, particularly Arizona and New Mexico. A lot of that's due also to the failure of the monsoon, or what some people are referring to as sort of the spotsoon this year. Hasn't been as good as we had liked. You can also see the storm track from Tropical Storm Lee that kind of put a alley, if you will, between the drought in the southeast centered on Georgia and Alabama and South Carolina. And if it weren't for that, I think you would have seen this drought continue to strengthen between those two regions. And there may be reason to think that could materialize again later this winter if La Nina comes on full force. So we'll see what happens there. Next slide, please. What I would say, too, with regards to that national map is that the 2008 Farm Bill has been using that as a trigger for livestock forage disaster aid. And as of this year, as you can tell from this graphic here of the Southern Plains, that roughly, $500 million approximately has been used or triggered off of this map. And this year, 2011, already, and that's just through data through late September, has exceeded any of those one-year totals over the past 4 years. So this is obviously a very intense drought. You can see here a lot of what we call the extreme or exceptional drought, the dark red, the maroon color, if you will. We haven't seen that since we've been doing the drought monitor at this sort of intensity. In fact, the last time it was even, I think it was about 25% of this region in the south back in 2006. If you go back to 2001, we had a large area of severe drought, but that was only D2. So we can see, even though we're only looking at a 12 to 15-month event, it's been extremely intense. Next slide, please. Not to forget neighbors here to the west a little bit. We know we have some participants on the phone from Kansas and New Mexico. You can see, obviously, that region is kind of leaked into some of these regions around the Southern Plains, including Kansas, including New Mexico and southeast Colorado. We see that New Mexico, obviously, has been impacted tremendously as well, and we're going to hear more from Dave on that later. This week, not a whole lot of change. It's been pretty static. There's been some general improvement over the last month or so in the drought monitor, but obviously still very intense with the failure of any tropical moisture to come up the Gulf. Next slide. So let's take a look at what may or may not be coming down the pipe, I guess you could say. For the next 5 days, you can see some chances for some precipitation. mainly in southern Texas and parts of, say, western New Mexico and eastern Arizona. But even that darkest green color there is around 1/4 of an inch, so we're not talking much more than a dust settler at this point. Temperature-wise, pretty much seasonal for the southern plains, maybe a little bit above normal as you go north into Oklahoma, Kansas, New Mexico, and Colorado. So the 5-day period looks pretty high and dry, as we would say. Next slide. Moving on to the 6 to 10-day forecast, unfortunately, as our colleague Gary McManus would say there in Oklahoma, it's looking pretty darn ugly. We see greater chances for above normal temperatures on the top left graphic. That's the temperature forecast. They're not telling you how much above normal. They're just hedging our bets that it's looking like it's going to fall into the above normal range. How much above normal will depend on other factors that come into play over the next week or two. But obviously there's a nice swath of very strong confidence by the forecasters that we'll see that all the way from the southern plains up to the Great Lakes region. If you look at precipitation over the same period, obviously not good either. That dark brown there, greater confidence that will fall into the below normal range of precipitation. 8 to 14-day, next slide, pretty much the same picture. It's not looking very good. We're looking at, again, greater odds of above normal temperatures and below normal precipitation, so that's not the combination we want to see either. And then if we go to the next slide, we're going to hear later on in the series specifically about La Nina, but what I can tell you looking at the seasonal forecast and focus on the bottom two maps is the October through December, they're already starting to take into account their feeling that La Nina has reemerged, and that is what's driving this forecast for the most part. They look at many other things, but right now that's one of the major players along with trends and other factors. But you can see again, not a lot of relief there if we see typical La Nina winter, which you folks experienced last winter. That traditionally means warmer and drier conditions across most of the southern tier states. So we can see both temperature and precipitation, even up into the Great Lakes region. That area where we were talking about maybe some redevelopment of the drought, connecting the southeast drought back to this drought in the southern plains and Mississippi Delta, could appear over the coming months. And the next slide and the final slide I'll talk about today is the seasonal drought outlook that the Climate Prediction Center puts out, the same folks that put out that seasonal forecast I just showed you. And as you would expect, pretty much the same. Driving this is La Nina. You don't see a lot of green on the map where they're showing a chance for improvement. Mostly what you see here is persistence, and that means because of that La Nina pattern, warmer, drier conditions expected over the next 3 months, that we would expect that drought to remain entrenched as it is. And so I think we'll hold for questions later on, and we'll move on to our next speaker. Thanks. Oh, sorry, I had one other feature I want to try to expose folks to about the drought monitor, and there will be a separate webinar feature later on in this series that gives folks out there a lot more detail about how do we do that and what's in it. But I just wanted to highlight a key thing here that you can find under the Archive tab at the Drought Monitor website. Next slide, please. So, at the Archive tab, which you can see at the top of the screen, once you come to that page, you've got a couple choices. We've got maps and we've got GIS data. You can compare the United States if you go to the gray box. Let's go to the next slide. That will show you that you can choose any state in that gray box, in this case Texas, and you can choose any 2 dates on those 2 windows, and you can fast forward or backward and kind of compare different weeks. That'll pop up in the table, and then you can also plot that time series. So if we go to the next slide, what I really want to emphasize under GIS data is this is where you folks can go to get actual county level data for the percent of time in each category for each week of each month of each year going back to 2000. So that's an Excel spreadsheet. On the left you can see choose your year, and on the right the various shape files and web mapping services options are going to be available to you. And so that was one thing we wanted to close with here today, is to make people aware of this resource. And if you have a customized sort of request, please contact us. At the top of that page you can see Brian Fuchs is listed there. Just send us an email. And I think that's it this time.
All right. I'm John Nielsen-Gammon. I'm the State Climatologist for the state of Texas. And this portion is a brief update of status within Texas. Focus on the broad overview. We'll talk about specific aspects of it in more detail later on in this series. What you're looking at here is the statewide precipitation for the period October through September. And you can see some of the major drought years over on the left. 1956 stands out, but we're just about at the end of September this year, and it looks like 2011 is going to be even 2 inches below the 1956 record, which puts it basically about 40% of the normal precipitation for a 12-month period for Texas. So we've been calling this the worst one-year drought on record, mainly for that reason. And of course, the summer has been unusually hot as well. This plot shows that it's not an accident that it was hot, because the less rainfall you tend to get, the warmer the temperatures are. And the red dot in the upper left is what came in for this particular year. Actually, the last several years have been above the line, above the normal regression, which we attribute to the longer-term, broader-scale climate change. But most of the warm temperatures are related to the lack of water, because the sun doesn't expend any energy evaporating water, and so it all goes into heating the ground. On the next slide, we've got, I wanted to show how rapidly we came into this drought situation. So it started about a year ago. You can pretty much pin it down to the date. About September 27th was our last major rainfall within September, and then it turned dry. And at that time, parts of East Texas were sort of on the dry side. They'd gotten relatively less rain than they normally do. But now if you look at where we are 1 year later, with the drought index, generally anything below -2 is considered to be exceptional, and -3 is basically, in scientific terms, unheard of, or at least so low probability you don't expect to see it in any given 100-year period. And you can see it's affected most of the state. Dallas-Fort Worth area got the heat, but has had relatively more rainfall than the rest of the region. The biggest impact has mainly been in West Texas, where there's no drought in the past century that compares to this one. Next slide, please. Of course, a variety of impacts. We'll focus on particular impacts in something we're called the short-term drought. You may have noticed the S's and L's on the drought monitor. It's a bit of a change of notation from the past. Short-term impacts mainly focus on farming and ranching. If you get even a few weeks of dry weather in the summer, it can really dry up the moisture and harm crops. But we had no moisture to plant, and then it was dry during the growing season as well. So the major farming losses, major ranching losses. We're seeing sell-offs of cattle that are unprecedented. We're probably down to levels of cattle not seen since the 1960s. As the drought goes on, we'll see more and more water supply impacts. As you heard earlier, the prospects for the near-term future do not look good. But the water supply impacts tend to be add-ons, so those will gradually get worse as the drought lasts. Although during the wintertime, there's not much water usage by municipalities, so those water supply impacts will reemerge next spring and summer. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, wildfire. We've had major wildfires across the state. We've had our most destructive wildfire ever. We have had our largest amount of acres affected ever. And if you go to the next slide, I want to indicate where current fire danger is worse. This is the SPI drought index computed over the last 2 months, and it's been dry for the past 2 months as well, but there's been some rain in parts of the state. The parts of the state that's really missed out on anything the past couple of months has been central Texas, from the Austin area, the nearby hill country, across towards Houston. And we have a cold front that is approaching the panhandle right now. It's supposed to sweep through the state tomorrow, with dew points in the 30s and 40s behind it. So the most immediate concern for the drought is actually tomorrow, and the chance of wildfire already had some destructive fires, but we may see the same thing again tomorrow. Now I'll turn it over to Dave DuBois, who is my counterpart, State Climatologist in New Mexico.
Thanks for the introduction, John. We get to the first slide. This is Dave DuBois. I'm a state climatologist for New Mexico. I am physically located in Las Cruces, New Mexico, in southern New Mexico. The first slide I'd like to look at is statewide January to August precipitation rankings. So these are represent 117 years that were ranked statewide average precipitation, and we share the same flows as Texas as being the record driest. So that's one, means that's the worst in the record. So the average statewide precip was 4.59 inches. That compared to the average of 9.49. So that's 4.9 inches below the 20th century average. If you go to the next slide, please. Okay, there's a map of New Mexico with, this is the 2011 January to August, so the first 8 months precipitation, and what we show is the select number of National Weather Service cooperative stations, and the white lines in the background are the climate divisions, and then the other lines are the contours of average precipitation. As you can see, just like the drought monitor map shows, the worst impacts are in the southeast part of the state. We've got areas there are in the 0 to 20% of normal. So just bringing out the extremes, the southeastern plains climate division average precip is 21% of normal. So it's pretty bad. Just taking one station, for instance, like Carlsbad, they had 1.59 inches the first 8 months of 2011. That's 6.52 inches below the normal. So then there's, I could list many other ones are more than 6 inches below normal. So it's pretty bad. If you go to the next slide, I'm just looking at the summer precip. Compared to on the left side is 2011, and on the right side is 2010. So these are by climate divisions. As you can see, on the left side are 29% of normal southeastern plains impacts. The average statewide precip was 3.45 during the summer. So the average is 20th century average is 5.95. So that's the second driest on record. That compares to 1980 was the only other drier period for this June through August period. And if you compare that to last year, it's a whole different picture. We're looking at most of the climate divisions were more than 100% of normal, with only the Central Valley's climate division just shy in the northern mountains. So if you look at statewide average, 63%. For this year, last year, it was 110% normal. Okay, next slide. I just want to acknowledge Ed Glasgow of the National Weather Service Forecast Office in Albuquerque for helping out with these graphics. And I just want to, just a taste of one of the topics we may discuss is wildfires. This was a graphic that I pulled off of the NIFC industry website. It's very interesting to note that there was over 1 million acres been burned on wildfires. So last year there was just 120,000, and so this right now we're at the largest on record since 1990. And just informational, the one fire, most conscious fire, was 156,000. That was more than the whole year of last year. And then there's a lot of other fires that are near 100,000 this year. So it's, I hope we get to talk about this later, and I'll transfer over to Gary next.
Thank you very much, Dave, and everybody that's presented before me. I get to put the final nail in the coffin of this depressing webinar with all this nasty weather. But, I wanted to concentrate on what we sort of hoped would happen. As you can see, this is our normal monthly precipitation across the state of Oklahoma. We have our primary rainy season that occurs from about mid-April through about mid-June. May and June are our wettest 2 months of the year. However, we have a secondary rainy season that occurs in September, October. As it turns out, if we can go to the next slide, September has pretty much been a dud across the state. We have had some relief over in northeastern Oklahoma, and of course we had the downpour down around Granfield in Tillman County with 3.3 inches. But just from looking at the totals there, you can see there wasn't much relief over much of the state, especially in the western half of the state where the drought has been at its worst through this episode. Next slide, please. And that shows up in this percent of normal rainfall map for September. Now this goes through yesterday, but there's no rainfall on the horizon for today or tomorrow. So this is what it's going to end up looking like. And you can see, between 40 and 20%, even less than 20% over much of southern and western Oklahoma. There were a few areas that got those lucky rainfalls, and that did allow for some improvement in our drought monitor map. If we can go to the next slide. So while most of the state still remains in that D4 exceptional drought, up to 66%, we did have a reduction over there in eastern Oklahoma along I-40 where they did get those more generous rainfalls over the last 3 weeks or so. We had 2 rainfall events during September that really helped out eastern Oklahoma in that area. But you can see the D3, D4 area went from 90% of the state down to about 79%. So about an 11% reduction over in eastern Oklahoma. But again, in the western parts of the state where that drought has been D4 for much of the year, it remains in D4, that exceptional drought. So not good news for the western parts of the state. And that also runs along the Red River over to southeastern Oklahoma and, of course, out into the western parts of the Oklahoma Panhandle. Next slide, please. And just as with Texas, as John mentioned, this drought pretty much started just about a year ago on the dot. These are the rainfall totals we can see for that water year from October 1st, 2010 to September 30th. I'm cheating a little bit. This will still be what it is tomorrow as well. But for this current water year, we go from about 48 inches over in far east central Oklahoma, which is easily the state's maximum, over to the really sad numbers over in western Oklahoma and the western Oklahoma Panhandle. You can see Hooker there in the Oklahoma Panhandle had 5.2 inches basically for the last 365 days. For western Oklahoma and parts of south central Oklahoma, really you're talking west of I-35, this is easily the driest water year on record dating back to 1895 by 2 to 3 inches, just as it was with Texas. So, the relief that we hope to see this fall hasn't occurred with all the outlooks that were talked about earlier. The drought remains, the chance that the drought remains is looking more and more likely. So really the next records we're looking at, hopefully not breaking, would be one of our driest years on record. And if Hooker doesn't get more rainfall, we might see one of our driest or lowest totals on record in Oklahoma as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to the moderators, and hopefully we'll get any questions answered that you might have.
Thank you to Gary and to all of our presenters this morning who joined us. We'll go to questions here, beginning with anything that, if we have anything in our dialogue box or anybody with their hands raised, we're calling you. Just would like to point out we're going to leave this page up that has some resources on there, and you'll see things like the Drought Portal. All of this information today this webinar and then a summary of this will be posted on the Drought Portal in a South Central section. I believe right now if you go to it today, there's the flyer announcement of this. If you click on that, it will get you to the South Central part, or you can go directly through this link here, and several other resources that are available. I'd also like to draw attention to the little box in the lower corner there, that if you're on here and you're looking at the drought monitor depiction and you think that it's either underplaying or overplaying too, if conditions aren't as bad as we're depicting, tell us, because your input is incredibly important. As Mark mentioned, over $500 million this year in the conservation program is related to what's depicted on that map. So there are very real impacts. We want to get it right. So you can tell us about it either by going to the Drought Impact Reporter. You can contact your state climatologist. We're all in contact with the Drought Monitor authors. Or you could email the Drought Monitor authors directly at their address there, droughtmonitor@unl.edu. So there's several choices. We really want to hear from you and get this depiction right, because we know there's a lot at stake here. So we'll see if there's anybody has any questions here. Looking at. Yeah, I see. Can we send the slides out? We'll post the slides on the the second link on there in the Drought Portal. This PowerPoint, and we're recording it, and that'll be on there. And then we're also going to produce a 2-page PDF summary of this. So kind of hitting the highlights of what everybody presented. Probably the front page will kind of talk about where we are, the status of the drought at the time, and the back page will include the focus topic. And in this case, it'll be just this overview of conditions and how we got here. So we're going to be working on producing that within the next few days, and should have it up on that website next week as well. And that's an easier document to pass around than a set of PowerPoint slides, but both will be on there. Let's see, we have a question. Are you all working with USGS to look at surface water or groundwater flows compared to normal conditions? That's later on. We'll talk about the Drought Monitor process more, but I think that groundwater and stream flows are key factors, or things that we look at every week. And I think Mark, as a Drought Monitor author, you might have some more on to say on that.
Yeah, I'd echo what you said, Mark, and that is that each state, obviously, the network varies as far as the number of stations that record that data, especially groundwater. A lot of times the wells aren't available near real time. We do look at those that are, though, and we look, obviously, at the stream flow. And we work actually with USGS quite a bit. Nationally, they've really couched and tailored a lot of their products to meet our needs. So we are working hand in hand with USGS.
Okay. See, I think we're having a few problems here with our connection on this end. Not sure what's going on. So
Questions could be over the phone.
So we'll just open up to the phone for now. So if anybody is on the line and wants to ask a question, please unmute your phone and chime in.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
This is Sharon Coe at Rocky Mountain Research Station in Albuquerque, and I was wondering, is there any question about whether this will be a La Nina year or not? If there is, at what point do we become more confident that it will or will not be?
Dave, do you want to, I guess Dave Brown, do you want to try that one?
Well, I'm actually going to pass it to my colleague from the National Weather Service, Victor Murphy.
Okay.
Victor, do you want to take that question?
Yeah, the Climate Prediction Center, I believe the first week of this month, issued a La Nina advisory, which means that La Nina conditions are likely to occur in the next 6 months. So it's looking increasingly likely that, yes, we will have a repeat La Nina.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, I'll just, I guess, wrap this one up then if there aren't anything further, and say what we will do from this point forward is we will post the slides, the webinar, and the a summary on there. And then prior to the next scheduled webinar, which will be on the second Thursday in October, and then another one on the fourth Thursday in October, and then we'll just keep repeating these. We have your votes on the topics that you'd like to see, and unfortunately, because of the the connection problems we're having here. We're not able to pull that up right now, but it is recorded. And we will look at those recommendations, and we will get the get some speakers in line and do a focus on one of those topics on the next one. We will send out what the topic will be and then the connection details on the Monday prior to the next webinar, and then you can see if you're able to join us. Please, we'd love to have you back. Please pass this information along to colleagues who you think that would benefit from this, who have to manage these kinds of situations. If we get large enough demand, we'll find a way to try to get more than 100 participants possible. So we'll keep working on this. There's a lot to discuss, and unfortunately, we're probably going to be talking about drought for a long time, it looks like. With that, I think we'll thank everybody for participating. And if you have any questions of us, please, you can email us at skip@mesonet.org, the same site you used to get on the list, or give us a call or contact any of the sources we have on there on the list. So thank you, everybody, for participating, and have a good remainder of the week.